give a warm welcome to the hosts of The Bride of Alternate Ending.
Hello, ghouls and goblins. This is what I would sound like if I was in the 70s. Groovy, lava lamp. Let's go watch Charlie's Angels. I, as you know, am your ghost, Brennan Klein, with you, with me, and you, with all of us, at one time or another, always in our hearts. Your co-ghost, Tim Brayton. How are you
Did
doing today, Tim?
did you just accuse me of being sexually promiscuous with our listenership?
No, this is more of a transubstantiation
Okay.
kind of situation.
Okay.
When people imbibe the craft of filmmaking, you are present with them in spirit.
I I certainly try to be. So thank you for that.
Yes.
I've always thought of myself more as a sort of Holy Ghost figure than a God figure as far as movies go. So
And that's perfect. You are in fact, the holy co-ghost.
hey.
And we're here. Oh my god. Oh my god. This is
We both agreed before we started recording that we were in our own different ways kind of rattled, and I feel like this is playing out better than I could possibly have hoped for it to do in my dreams.
yeah. I'm. Look, I'm happy to be here. I'm very excited to talk about this movie actually. So let's set up what the fuck we're doing.
Well, we're talking about
This.
movies, specifically horror movies, as part of
Yeah.
the horror movie side project of Alternate Ending.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for reminding me. This is the month because now that the Oscar nominations have been unveiled upon the world, uh, I mean, to the lukewarm reaction of me, I'm just like, oh,
It
I
seems
was
like
so excited,
the
but
only thing that matters whatsoever is that a subset of people are not dealing well with Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie only getting nominated for one award apiece as opposed to two. Or I guess in Gerwig's case, two instead of three.
yeah. Which I, you know, there are reasons to feel like that is a problem considering all the other nominations that Barbie got. But the fact that Barbie got any nominations is already just a little treat for y'all. And honestly, I think the biggest surprise for me was America Ferrera getting nominated, and I thought she was really good in Barbie, so I'm happy about that.
I mean, I thought she was not particularly good in Barbie, but I'm in general not a pro Barbie f presence in this world. But I mean,
Yeah,
it certainly was, I think, maybe the big surprise of nomination day. So yeah, so take your wins. You know who was not nominated for anything? The noted female director Sofia Coppola, who made my fourth favorite movie of the year. So why don't we where's the outrage for that? That's what I want to know.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like there are so many movies directed by women that also deserve Best Director nominations that didn't. It's like it's not Barbie's not the only movie that exists, even though it's the one that people have heard of.
Hmm.
Also, 2023 sucked. Let's go back to 1976.
Let's do that.
Um, yeah,
Notably
this
great
year.
year. Vietnam is over. The gas crisis hasn't quite started yet. We're actually in kind of a donut hole of things being pretty mellow.
And then comes this. So, you might have heard of a certain actor named Jodie Foster who was nominated for a movie called Naiad that nobody has seen. Um, or
In
just,
part because its name is the worst collection of four letters ever assembled in the title of an American motion picture.
yeah, is it the name of a person? Is it an
It is the
acronym?
surname of the Annette Bening character, whose name I believe to be Diana Nyad, which, to be fair, that's just a name that if that's what you got stuck with, go with God, because the world hates you.
Yeah, Diana Nyad sounds like a palindrome,
D
even though it's not.
Diana Nyad sounds like an anagram, or I don't even know what it
Yeah.
sounds like. It sounds like
If it
if your surname was Nyad and you named your child Diana, shame on you.
Yeah, it's definitely the beginning of a Dan Brown novel. We're gonna unfurl the mystery. But yes, anyway, so Jodie Foster is nominated for Naiad, so we are plumbing a horror skeleton from her closet. There's no reason for us to talk about The Silence of the Lambs, you know. So we are doing the 1976 movie The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane, written by Laird Koenig, adapting his own novel. And had you heard of this movie? I hadn't.
So I had definitely heard of this movie. I actually thought up until about 45 seconds into watching it, I thought that I had seen this movie, and I thought that I had seen it more than once. Like I very
Oh.
confidently was like, "Oh yeah, that movie where Jodie Foster is the abandoned kid who's killing people. That's a great movie. I've seen it. Love it." I haven't seen it. I recognize none of the sets. I recognize none of the rest of the cast. I mean, I recognize them, but like I don't know how I had this very clear sense of having seen this film. And I think somehow like I had a really weird neural misfiring where I had like filed Let's Scare Jessica to Death in the box of
Hmm.
I've seen Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane. Nothing remotely in common. They're both from the 70s, but not even from like the same part of the 70s. Not also a movie about a killer child. I have no idea how, but that's the best I could come up with. Because like the period when I thought I saw this movie, I was like, I saw it in like 2012. That's when I saw Let's Scare Jessica to Death. So I somehow just made a bizarre mental fart. But I have heard of this movie. To answer your question in a more concise way.
Yeah, no worries. I look, I whatever. I mean, it just kind of it slipped through my net somehow. But it's also, I mean, this is a wild year for Jodie Foster. It's this Taxi Driver, Bugsy Malone, and Freaky Friday, and a fifth one I don't remember. She got her first Oscar nomination the following year for Taxi Driver. Like Jodie Foster is exploding, and I think this movie is definitely the one of the ones that people talk about less from
I
1976.
mean, it's almost not its fault just because look at that
Yeah.
that list of movies. This was her first starring role. Depending on how exactly you want to characterize her role in Bugsy Malone and Freaky Friday, it was her only starring role in 1976. But so this was like a major film in her development from child actor to actor. Uh, but yeah, you're correct. It does seem to be maybe not the odd man out because I mean, who the hell talks about Bugsy Malone either? I do because I'm the kind of guy who would. But
Uh huh.
clearly, there's taxi drivers up here in the clouds with the gods, and then Freaky Friday is on the slopes of Olympus, and now we're here like in the town at the base of the mountain.
And look, I love being. I mean, I live in a town at the base of a mountain, so this is my perfect the perfect space for me. So let's talk about the plot a little bit. I mean, you kind of you hinted at it a little bit. But so Jodie Foster plays Rin Jacobs. We don't know exactly what her deal is for a while, but she's very clearly
She's
faking.
clearly got a deal.
Yes, yeah, she's got a deal. She is clearly fake covering for an absent father and pretending that he is around when he's not. We don't know that he's dead. We can presume that he's dead,
It's
but we don't know.
I will say this since we're going there. This is an amazing script in that it is very easy to guess what the twists are going to be, but not how the twists are going to be. So as you say,
Mhm.
it seems like the dad's probably dead. Like that feels like a pretty safe bet pretty early on. But
Yeah.
it is deep into the movie before it confirms that A, but B gives us any indication of like by what mechanism that occurred. And that's I think a very cool way of structuring a film because it lets you have twists that feel much more earned and also much harder to get in front of, I think. If you're like, yeah, of course the dad's dead, but you bet you don't know why.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. But anyway, so it's basically Jodie Foster is living in this. It's a very simple, tight premise. Like I wouldn't have been surprised to learn that it was based on a play, which it isn't. But it feels very, for the most part, confined to one room of one
Mm-hmm.
house. And it's basically just Jodie Foster trying to live her life as a secretly emancipated 13-year-old and just fighting against forces that are both trying to prevent her from being such and then also actively working evil against her in other ways.
Yes, it is
And
simultaneously a film about the dangers besetting all children and the dangers besetting children who are not fitted into the world of adults in a way that the adults find perplexing.
yes. But yeah, so those people include Frank Hallett, the local pedophile, played by Martin Sheen.
And anytime you have a movie where just the objective best two-word phrase to describe a character is the local pedophile, you're in the 70s, baby.
Uh-huh. Oh, it's so deeply 70s.
Also,
It
the fact that he's
also
wearing like an opera cape while he's swanning about being a pedophile. It's like, oh my God.
Oh yeah, it's wild. And also this is one of the elements that also speaks to this being a French and French Canadian co-production of the 1970s. There's a different scene that I think is more specifically that happens later. But yeah, so he is the first adult character we meet in one of the most chilling sequences
Hmm.
of the movie, maybe the most. He's kind of creeping around a lot of the
The
time,
the
but
film is bookended by chilling sequences that I otherwise don't want to start comparing because I don't want to give away spoilers too early on. But I think the most chilling scene is the last scene, but I think the second most
mm,
chilling scene is the one we're in right now.
yeah, and I think they're both so good. Jodie Foster is I mean, Jodie Foster has the Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween thing where she already has her adult voice.
Hmm.
It sounds like it's just the Jodie Foster voice coming out of a child. She's got this kind of old beyond her years gravity to her.
Absolutely. I mean, Jodie Foster, it's weird to say she is one of the great child actors because it's hard to sort of mentally map her into child acting because she just has such a smooth transition from child to adult roles. There's never a point where she takes time off. So she doesn't like register my brain in a spot where she's a child actor, but I think there was this period in time where we are right now where you have her and you have Tatum O'Neal and it's basically like peak child actor. Like I think those are the two best child
Mm-hmm.
actors in the medium's history. Um, and Tatum O'Neal, of course, did not have a smooth transition into adult roles for numerous reasons. But yeah, no, Foster just she's great. Like she just has it. She already had it by this point. She'd proven she had it by this point. But yeah, she's dealing with these very thorny situations just immediately. Like scene number one, she suddenly has to carry the entire weight of this movie. It's thrilling to watch.
Yes, it is. And what you're saying about that kind of smooth transition is in 1976, Jodie Foster is playing adult roles. Taxi Driver is a very adult role. Freaky Friday, she's literally playing an adult.
Hmm.
Um, and this movie, I mean, I think it's her queer kid energy, which is like
Mm.
you do kind of a lot of queer kids report that their parents are always like, "Oh, you seem like a little adult. You seem so much older than your years." And it's like because I have a big fucking secret, everyone. I've learned a lot about life. But anyway, so yeah, there's a scene where basically she's home alone. She's got her birthday cake with 13 candles on it. Her birthday is also Halloween. Spooky. um,
Because it's a horror movie. So yeah, it's got to be set at Halloween.
of
It's the horror
course.
movie day.
Is it? I mean, we'll talk about this about if this movie is a horror movie
I
or
I,
not.
I will
But
say, well, we'll get there. We'll get there.
yeah, we'll get there. But anyway, so there's a knock at the door. She's like coming, and before that happens, she lights a cigarette and blows a couple puffs around, and you're like, oh, okay,
Which is
so
just a superb moment because it immediately just throws us off our game because it's like, okay, she's clearly hiding something. You can even start to surmise what she's hiding, but it's such a strange and inexplicable moment. And we just immediately get this sense of what a clever young lady this is. Like she's very quick-witted. She's solving a problem the nanosecond it comes up. At the same time, it's just there's such a weird sense of panic in the moment that it has to happen right now. It's just I love like immediately I'm just on board with the blocking in this. I'm on board with everything. Like the cigarette smoke scene made me feel I was in good hands.
very much. And lighting a cigarette off of her 13th birthday candle is a really potent image.
It sure is.
But anyway, so Martin Sheen shows up. He's playing Frank Hallett. He is the son of the woman who has leased this house to Jodie Foster and her father for the next 3 years. And it is very clear, very immediately, that he has a prurient interest in this character. He's touching her hair. He does smack her butt at one point. It is a chilling escalation of creepy things that he's doing. He's waiting for his own kids, his two sons, who are trick or treating like somewhere behind them. Um, and he keeps like while he's talking to her about her dad and about he just moved in. How do you like the house? He keeps looking out the window and like checking if there are people there. It is, it's a
It's
lot.
a wildly unpleasant sequence, and I mean, good for him for like just creating a character who has no shred of pleasant charisma. Like he's just an awful, awful presence the second that he starts talking. And he just kind of, it's not even just the things he's saying and the way he behaves, just like his carriage. Just like
Hmm.
he's kind of like slinking around. He feels like a predatory snake, and he's got the world's most awful 70s hair, and it's wonderful.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So it's just it's this really grim scene, and that's she kind of honestly in this scene he kind of chases himself out. He goes a little too far. He doesn't want to like rock the boat with her too much. I feel like because he kind of smacks her butt and then he backs away.
The
Um,
impression I already had by the end of that scene, he knows how far he can go before the police get involved.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, and so he kind of it's basically like a you haven't seen the last of me kind of thing. And his two kids do show up. She has given them slices of cake. And I mean just partially as a way to just get him out of the
Hmm.
house because she doesn't seem to genuinely know about Halloween because she is coming from London where she apparently grew up. But yeah, whatever.
And I will also say it's very well played by both actors, but certainly by Foster. She knows exactly what's happening. Like there is zero doubt. She knows as quickly as we do that this guy's bad news and why. But she's also sort of aware that if she lets him think that she is too sophisticated, that will cause her trouble. So she's trying to like usher him out in a way that is sort of not. It's very good. It's such a very good performance. I don't know. We'll be talking about
Yeah.
performance a lot.
Well, and that's the dynamic. She's trying to bat people away while convincing them that her dad exists and like without getting them to be too interested in what's going on in her house,
Hmm.
upstairs in the other room in the basement. Um which is without igniting any sort of suspicion, which is very difficult for her to accomplish. Especially when Frank Hallett's mom, Cora, shows up. She's played by Alexis Smith. And whew, I loved this character the second she
Great
swarmed onto
character.
the screen.
My God. The if the pedophile by nature of how the film wants to tell the story cannot be like a kitschy campy villain because that would be in bad taste. They have
Mhm.
dumped so much camp energy into his dreadful mother.
Yeah, she's like, okay, so she's like if Jessica Walter from Arrested Development looked like Julie Newmar and was doing an impression of Lauren Bacall.
Hmm.
She's just got all this like very kind of she's got crone energy.
It's
um
pretty great.
yeah, she's just she commands the room that she's in, and she's like plucking crab apples out in the garden, and she just walks into the house because she feels she I mean she does technically own it, but she just has this gross ownership over it and the people inside it. She's
Hmm.
like that table shouldn't be there. um
It's wonderful stuff. Wonderful,
oh yeah,
wonderful scene.
it's wonderful stuff, and she's like I came to get my jelly jars out of the basement. um
And that's
and
actually a
obviously
pretty good mimicry of the cadence and how she delivers her lines. It is this very the Bacall. I thank you for saying Bacall. I had this kind of like it feels like something, and I couldn't quite pin down what it felt like. And Bacall, I think, was the thing I was trying to pin down.
definitely latter era Bacall, like 1980s Lauren
Yes,
Bacall.
like no longer gives a shit Bacall.
Yeah, High Point Coffee commercial Lauren Bacall. Uh, delicious. Anyway, so she's one of these other adult figures. There's also a cop kind of floating around, who really only has her best interests at heart.
Yeah,
He sees her.
the cop is a good character who is nonetheless a threat because he's dumb or he's at least ignorant.
Yes. And so he's just a person that she has to balance in a different way, like not repelling him, but also keeping him at arm's distance.
Also, basically like assuaging his concerns for her well-being in a way that is like kind and ingratiating, so she does not transform him into someone who is actively trying to like look into her shit. Again, it's a very complicated like sort of nest of how a sophisticated 13-year-old plays adults by deciding what parts of I am 13 years old she should lean into versus what parts she needs to kind of bury beneath this kind of veneer of adult sophistication. Um, really great stuff. And I could watch a version of this movie that has nothing but her like constantly trying to manage adults' expectations around her. Because she's great at it. Like Foster is just nailing these scenes.
Hmm.
And I think they're very difficult scenes to play.
Yeah, they're very difficult, and I mean, most of the movie is that. There is a subplot that arises that is a kind of romantic kindling between her and this teenager.
And also at a certain point people do die.
Yeah, that's true.
Because it's a
I
horror movie.
sure.
It's a horror movie skeleton in the closet of actress Jodie Foster.
No, you're right. I mean, look, Letterboxd and IMDb listed it as a horror movie, which is why we put it on the list for people to vote for.
Yeah, I will say this. It is, I think, not horror, and I don't know why anyone would consider it a skeleton in her closet. She's excellent in this film. This is a
Well,
top tier performance.
oh yeah, I mean, we
We
for
call
what
it
we
skeleton in the
nominate, we don't
closet. I
really.
mean, but like
Yeah,
we try to at least obey the spirit of skeleton in the closet. But no, this is just a good character drama starring a phenomenally talented child actor. And
yeah,
it sort of nudges in the direction of thriller and maybe doffs its hat in a couple specific shots to being horror. The most horrifying thing about this movie is its poster.
oh yeah, it's a very kind of grotty '70s exploitation poster.
Absolutely. It's like she's a silhouette. There's like this creepy looking line drawing of like the road leading down to her house that does not in any way correspond to any set we see in the movie.
Hmm.
So it looks like this kind of gothic horror type poster. Like that's clearly how they're trying to advertise it. And then you get into the movie and there's just zero of that. And I do wonder if that's part of why the film's reputation is maybe not as sky high as it easily could be, I think. Uh, it it is not selling itself to the right audience. And it was not in 76, and I feel history has not unwound that, really.
Yeah, no, that sounds right. Um, it definitely. I mean, you'd be forgiven for thinking this was like an Omen ripoff by looking at that poster.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but no, it is really good. I think what you're saying though about the fact that it completely lacks horror atmosphere and stuff. I mean, it does lack atmosphere in general in a lot of ways. I think this is something we both talked about in our letterbox reviews.
Yeah, I think you and I had very, very similar responses to this, which is basically it is a pretty damn strong script that has a lot of, I think, genuinely excellent performances bringing it to life. And it has about as much style as a bag of McDonald's French fries.
Yeah, it's got very clammy direction. It just I think it does just by dint of like all the '70s signifiers, it does kind of allow you to sink into like this kind of warm stew of like '70s domesticity. But I think that's almost an accident.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I think a lot of that comes because it is, 48 years old. And and so there's a kind of time capsule quality, there's a kind of nostalgia quality. I think that it is amusing to me in a way the movie did not want it to be. And obviously, Frank Hallett is a horrifying predator who is saying things just to kind of hear himself say them and try to like seduce this child. He keeps talking about her beautiful, beautiful hair. And God bless Jodie Foster and God bless the makeup department. It's just like straw. It's just straight, stringy blonde hair. It is in no way, shape, or form visually pleasurable to look at, I wouldn't say.
Mm, yeah, it's definitely like this weird shag wig that's like if Farrah Fawcett hadn't curled her hair for 3 months.
And again, not blaming anyone involved. I think that's just how 13-year-old hair be in 1976.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, Jodie Foster. This was a wig because Jodie Foster's hair was shorter than
Hmm.
this already. But it's not altogether unlike what the kind of hair she had in, say, Candle Shoe. You
Sure.
know. Also, that came after this, didn't it? Wild. It might have. Maybe
I can
maybe
look that up.
slightly earlier.
I will. This came actually. I mean, both earlier in her career and not, because she's basically been acting since she emerged from the womb. But
Hmm.
but I think Candle Shoe was later. Let me see if I can scratch that up for you while you're talking.
Yeah, because like featured, she was like on TV and stuff and in more minor roles, but like when she was starring in things,
Yeah, the next year was Candle Shoe.
got it. Yeah, the wild. Um, but yeah, anyway, so yeah, just the filmmaking is just not so dynamic, and I think it really hampers. Like I think, well, I just think it is a movie that I really liked, and I think it's a movie that I would love if it had just like a little bit of extra sauce on it.
Right. Like
um,
I'm not saying it needs to be drenched with like gloomy shadows because being a
mhm,
horror movie is not where this film wants to be, and I don't think it should want to be there. It is occasionally a psychological thriller.
mhm.
And it's not even always that. And I think it's fine that it's not always that. It is rarely to never an actual, I would say, horror movie, whatever that means. So I don't want to say that I want it to be more of that. I'm not saying I want it to have gore effects or,
Oh yeah, yeah,
creepy POV shots or whatever. I do think it feels like a TV movie. Like it just has this kind of very plain, everything is very evenly lit. Like it's very flat imagery.
yeah. And I agree. I didn't mean to imply that I wanted it to be more horror. I just wanted it
I
to be
want it to be more
more
something.
something. Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
exactly.
Godfather is not a horror film, but look at what Godfather's doing with shadows. Why can't this be? Why didn't Gordon Willis shoot the little girl who lives down the lane? Is what I'm saying. What else was he up to
Look,
in 1976?
I don't know. It can't have been as good as this though. So, but yeah. So, I mean, there is that. But is there anything else that's legitimately bad or even not good about this movie?
Honestly, I don't know that there is. Like, I certainly had my suspicions about the subplot with the cute magician boy when that begins, because I was like, he A doesn't seem to really have the same handle on his character that the rest of the cast does, and I think that changes. Or maybe I just got in his way like that. I don't know. And it's also it feels a little weird for that subplot to happen in this film anyway. But by the time the movie was over, I think I saw where it was. I saw because of where it had gone to, why it needed to get there, and maybe it just didn't start quite as fluidly and flawlessly as it would have been nice. But that's kind of the other thing I've got is the
Mm-hmm.
magician boy doesn't feel 1,000% right all the time.
I I I don't 100% agree with you on that. Just in terms of like, I was willing to allow him to enter this movie and kind of do his thing, and he definitely does warm up. But it is kind of a wild choice where the just all of a sudden, about like, somewhere between the 1/3 and the 1/2 mark, a magician just bicycles his way into the movie. And you don't have any context for him for what feels like a full minute as he rides toward Jodie Foster, and
Hmm.
then you learn who this character is. So it is this strange way to just to transport a magician into the little girl who lives down the lane in the movie. He does transport into her as well. They do start a sexual relationship,
Indeed, they do.
which kicks off one of those very French scenes that I was French and 70s scenes that I was talking about, where they're
Yes.
like getting into bed, and Jodie Foster just gets naked on camera, and she's 13, and
Well,
but
that's that's
it's
not Jodie
so
Foster.
it's not it's is it a body
It was
double?
like a big thing. Like Jodie Foster was threatening to like walk out of the film because of that scene.
Okay.
What it finally landed on, it was her older sister, her 21-year-old sister.
Oh, okay, interesting. Okay, that makes me feel a little better about um what happened on set. But obviously, like, it is the character getting naked, and I was like, oh well, this is just happening. Okay.
This is not a to the devil a daughter situation.
Interesting. Okay, well, I'll think about that. Um, but yeah, no, that just I was just like, well, that wouldn't have happened today, and that is an okay. What I mean, whatever. As long as I don't know, it's complicated.
It is it
Um,
is it is a scene that may still be in dubious taste and may or may not we may or may not wish to agree with because apparently Jodie Foster wanted it out of the movie entirely, like even though it was not her body. Um, that may or may not be the correct choice. I mean, I think that the scene couldn't be cut because then there would not be a very important narrative scene. I think nudity did not need to be part of that scene. Uh, no laws were broken, which is a weird thing to have to say, and yet there are movies where underage women are naked on set in 70s films. So laws can be again To the Devil a Daughter. Still to this day,
mhm.
don't understand how To the Devil a Daughter was legal to release in theaters.
yeah, and it is a complicated conversation I don't super want to dive into, but it's definitely just like, oh wow, that feels different.
Yep, it does.
um but yeah, so she does have this sexual relationship with Mario, sexual and romantic, and friendship. Like there is a strong connection that she has with him, and he's very supportive of her from the jump, more or less. And I think that their relationship's really important, both in terms of the fact that she desperately doesn't want to be alone, and a person that she can do that with is someone who is also underage, though less underage than she is, because they understand where she's coming from, and the way that she views the world to a certain degree.
Hmm.
But it showcases another way that she is basically a fully functional adult who is capable of taking care of herself, and that we can believe that she deserves to live the life that she's trying to live, essentially.
Right.
So yeah, I do. Yeah, I agree that the scene is important, not necessarily in the way that it was presented, but like that kind of subplot gels with everything.
It does, and I think there again. I think there are certainly other ways of staging that scene, but they didn't choose those ways because again, it's a French Canadian co-production. So
Yeah.
those deranged pervert Canadians.
um, but yeah, I guess the only other thing I would say that was maybe I'm not sure. Once the movie finished, I wasn't I wasn't left with a sense of like, I don't know. I really enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed the twists and turns. I enjoyed the performances and spending time with the characters. But I'm not sure like, why was this story told? I just had a sense of like, oh, okay. And I don't know. It might just be the sense of like, it didn't feel like there was necessarily a narrative conclusion, which is a fine thing for there to have, especially in the 70s. You're not going to get that all the time. But that was just a question I asked, and I don't think it's a question that I think the answer is important, but it's just something that felt like it felt a little weightless at the end for me. I don't know if you agree at all, because
I'm
obviously
not
the
sure.
final scene is
I mean, I think the final scene covers a lot of sins. It's the first scene where Nicholas Gessner is absolutely dialed into directing this as a thriller. Um,
yes,
Incredibly uncomfortable, like shot reverse shot cutting, where you just have this simultaneous sense of Jodie Foster as being like completely worn down by the ends of the film, but also sort of weirdly steely in a way that we then figure out why this is going on. That she has once again outwitted the adults in the room, including in this case, I think ourselves. And maybe you got ahead of the
mm-hmm.
ending, I did not. Uh, but there's also this use of Chopin, who has been kind of trickled into the film, but really just comes to the fore in this scene, and it's just this terribly jangling sounding piano performance. And I mean, I know the piece in question, so I know that's just the piece, but like it's placed into the movie in a way that feels like an assault on your ears and just makes the whole thing much more fraught and sort of nerve-wracking to me. Really completely knocked on my ass by this final scene. So that buys the movie a lot of goodwill for me, for sure. Um, but sort of more broadly than that, I don't know that I don't know that I need a movie to explain why it's telling me its story if the story's a good yarn. And I think this is a good yarn. I think it's interesting watching clever characters weave their way out of situations that are difficult to navigate to me.
Yeah.
I don't know that I need more than
Yeah, and I don't know that I do either. Like I think I agree with you. It's just that like in the moment it had ended, I had that thought, and I'm just trying to process it a little bit.
that. That's fair.
Where it's definitely, it feels like the movie, it feels like a dream, kind of.
A
Like
bit.
it and it is a very good dream. I mean, not for the content, in the sense of like the story, the
It
narrative.
is a well-built
Um,
dream. The dream fairies did a good job with narrative structure this time around.
yes, for once. Um, so I mean, it left an impression on me. It's still with me. I'm still thinking about it. But it feels like it drifts away very quickly once it's over, and not in the way that I think we talked about with Death Game, where a 70s movie will just end and throw you out of it. It just feels like it evaporated a little bit. Like it just kind of it got raptured away from me. um, I don't know.
It definitely feels like lessons have not been learned. Like I don't know that I think that Rin is a different person at the end of this movie than she was at the start of it, and I wonder if that's maybe what you're sort of bouncing off of.
Yeah, or just or anything like that. Like it's just a
Because
sense of like
it's very much about here's this young girl who has been caused by accident and misfortune to be entirely responsible for herself in life. A number of adults are going to find that situation confusing enough that they don't even really ever understand what's going on. No one ever really understands what's going on other than maybe Martin Sheen. And and so the movie is basically she's going to use the toolkit of survival skills that she had going into this story to get those adults out of the way. And she has done so,
yes.
and the movie ends. So she is not she is fundamentally exactly the same person we met. And that's always a weird thing for a movie to do, especially with a 13-year-old child as the protagonist. But
Yeah. Yeah, that is weird. That's a very good point. I think that's part of it. But I also think it's part of like cuz this movie it is very much a slice of life movie. It's one that I think could only have ended some not ambiguously, but in a way that's like this is going to keep happening. This is just one chapter of her
mhm.
story. Um but also I just feel like there's all of a sudden kind of a lot of incident in the last 20 minutes.
Mm.
And only one of those incidents really wraps itself up. And let's talk. Let's lift the spoiler veil. Let's just talk about it if that sounds good.
Sure, that sounds good.
Okay. So, because obviously there's the final confrontation with Martin Sheen, where she is attempting to poison him and does succeed after some twists and turns. But there, which we can talk about in more detail. But there's also the matter of Mario has gotten pneumonia from burying the body of Frank's mother in the rain, and he's in the hospital and he's fine. But there's also this sense that Jodie Foster might have also gotten pneumonia, which is not really played up at all. And
I don't even know that
uh,
I caught on to that, honestly. So it's definitely not played up much at all.
okay, I was just getting yeah, it's very simmering, and it's just something that I got the sense of, and maybe I wasn't even supposed to. Um, but there's a sense of like if she gets ill, this whole house of cards could come crumbling down.
Hmm.
And that's one more like poke in the balloon. Um, but that just none of that subplot really did anything at the end. It felt like just a lot of stuff to me.
It felt like there was a certain degree of we had a functional reason for getting Mario. We had a functional reason for getting Mario into the story, but we can't have him around for the final scene, so we need to get him
Yeah.
disposed of in some capacity. And I will tell you my thing that the film, I'm not sure if it had really resolved and if I'm reading too much into it. I kind of couldn't tell if he was dead in the last scene.
Oh.
Like I don't think he's supposed to be. I think if he's supposed to be, the movie would have telegraphed it more. But it does kind of feel to me like, is she ever going to see that kid again, or is he just going to die now and she's going to
Oh,
go off
if
and
Mario is dead.
yeah,
No, well they said something about like oh if, without the antibiotics he would have died. So I think he felt for sure alive to me.
yeah. I mean, like I think again, if it's meant to be that she's like over his corpse, the movie telegraphs that. But I mean more in the sense of like, will he die off screen before she sees him again in the hospital? Is sort of the vibe I was
Mm.
left with.
Yeah, there's just like yeah, it's a little fiddly
Yeah.
with that part. But like you said, that final scene is so great. Like it is very compelling. But then the place where it chose to end, first of all, very 70s still.
Very 70s.
But also I was just like, oh, I guess we're not gonna find out.
Yeah.
Bye bye, Mario. See you never.
And I mean, the relationship with Mario is not the movie. The movie is
No.
her survival skills, and we see her in a very fair way. Like it is a scene the movie has already described to us, which you know, simple screenwriting, you know, baby's first foreshadowing, but also worked really well for me. Um, so she has outwitted an adult in a very terminal fashion,
Mm-hmm.
and for at least right now, we know that whatever else is going to happen to her, the town pedophile will not be something she needs to be on high alert for.
Yes, which is great, and I think well, again, we are, it is spoiler time. She does poison Martin Sheen, and she poisons him in a way that she lets him suspect that she might be poisoning him, and he switches cups and then actually does drink the cup with the poison in it,
Yep.
which is very Princess Bride. It's very good. Um, but you don't see the moment of his death. The camera just holds on her face watching him.
Hmm.
And then it does a kind of "Call Me by Your Name" and credits thing where it's just rolling and rolling and rolling on her face while the fire crackles behind her, just looking at
And
this
she
guy
is not
dying.
blinking.
Yeah,
And man, I was getting a little twitchy just watching it.
yeah. It is a very solid way to end this movie, regardless of whatever plot threads we were talking
Yeah.
about.
And I think there's a couple pieces there. One, it is her movie, and we are meant to
Yes.
understand that this is her. It's at least implied. No, it's not. I was about to say something with them. It's just not even vaguely true in the movie. Forget this. But like, so she is, sort of grappling with this is how it's going to have to be. Like, these are the sorts of things I'm going to have to do if I'm going to keep, living my life this way. But also, I think the film is really terrified. It's sold as a horror movie. We sort of have it in culture as like this horror movie that Jodie Foster was in when she was 13. It is a movie that does not want to be misunderstood to be a horror film. And I
Mm-hmm.
think there's like we see the his mother, Martin Sheen's mother, dead. She gets bonked on the head by accident by the cellar door. But we never see his body. We also, that I can recall, never see the body of Jodie Foster's mother that has been in the basement this whole time.
No, we don't.
And so like there's this sense where that's a scary movie reveal, right? Like we hear uh the awful mother, the Les Smith character, screaming when she sees that corpse, and that's how she sort of bonks her head and dies. So there could easily be like a Psycho, the end of the movie Psycho type reveal, but we don't get that because again, this is a movie that is anxious to not be horror, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm very willing to let it tell me that. I mean, we're talking about it on the horror podcast, but we really, I mean, a lot of we've dived into plenty of just plain thrillers already. Like,
Hmm.
you got to do what you got to do as a horror genre aficionado.
And
Um,
what it comes down to is we just really didn't want to have to do Cape Fear.
yeah, it really does. Which also is also similarly borderline, though,
I
isn't
would
it?
say, although Cape Fear has stronger horror bona fides than this does, I would say.
Yeah, probably.
It has a
Um,
storm, if nothing else. It has
oh
rain.
yes. Hmm. Um, but yeah, no, but the thing that it is so. I
I
mean, again, it's
I think it's compelling. I had a really good time with it. Again, it's just kind of a story about a character navigating a tough situation in a way that does not indicate that she's free and clear. Like 20 minutes from now, the cop could come by and she's fucked. And the movie, I
yeah,
think, leaves that well open as a possibility.
yeah, and I think leaving that open as a possibility is fair. I think the ambiguity of her future, like obviously there was never going to be a way to solve the problem that she's living through. Um, but yeah, but no, but this movie, it is very just kind of floaty and dramatic, but it is always engrossing. Anytime a character's on screen, you're like, well, I love this person. What's going on with
Hmm.
them? Or I love watching this person
Yes,
because you don't.
yes.
Yeah. There's even a like county clerk at the courthouse who's this weird kind of overdone, vaguely British lady who I
Hmm.
enjoyed watching too. Um, but yeah, it's this really small. Uh, it is tightly written, but also not in a rush to go anywhere. In this kind of small scale, small cast, small amount of sets.
Yep.
She does go outside sometimes, but like I said, it does feel like an adaptation of a play that's like, oh, let's take it outside occasionally.
Yep. And this is I kind of teased this in my letterbox review, but I wanted to run this idea by you and see how you feel about
Okay.
it. And I'm kind of primed by Jodie Foster being in this. And same calendar year, I believe later the same calendar year she's in Freaky Friday. The following year she's in Candles Shoe. So Jodie Foster in the mid 70s, I think naturally nudges our brain into the Disney live action cinema of the
Mm-hmm.
period, which is possibly the most unloved era for the studio in its entire history. I think the 60s live action films at least have some level of like cheesy 60s fun. The 80s ones I think are actually kind of regarded as in some capacity classics by Gen X and older millennials. Um, but so we have this kind of unloved window of time where Disney's movies were just these kind of vaguely bookish, sort of pretty bland looking stories about industrious children navigating tough spots. And this, I don't know if you've seen much of Disney's output in this period, but Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane really struck me as being in some ways almost like a, I mean, parody wouldn't be the right word at all, but it sort of seems to kind of be almost consciously, what if one of those was really fucked up? Like, what if one of those was about
Mm.
sex and murder and pedophilia, but still has the kind of like somewhat bland settings and the kind of light, floaty quality. And I think that it was really the material with the magician boyfriend that really made me start feeling, oh, this kind of resembles like a dark mirror version of those Disney like smart kids having adventures with mildly dopey adults, but for some reason none of this is played as comic thing. Like
Hmm.
it's kind of a dark version of that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can't speak to it being intentional or not, nor does it really matter. It does. I do feel like it does play that way, though. So
I think to a certain extent it was almost me trying to excuse how shabby this movie looks. Is like, no, maybe there's a strategy for it not to look very interesting.
yeah,
But
like I
like
don't know
whether it's
that
a
I.
strategy or not, I think it lands. I think it plays that way.
Yeah, it does land. I don't know that I necessarily want to let the director off the hook. He does make some choices. Like I said, holding on Jodie Foster's face at the end, I think, was a very good aesthetic choice
Yes.
to do for that scene. Um, but yeah, I'm not inclined to trust the choices he was
No, and
making in the
I'm not
abstract.
saying it's a strategy that was deliberately pursued. I think it does have that kind of energy, even to a certain extent. Maybe it has that energy because he wasn't making concrete choices, so he just kind of latched onto what was an easy route. And I mean, these movies are out in the world, and you're casting a 13-year-old. I think that's kind of where your head lands is just make this kind of vaguely junky family adventure movie, but make it R-rated.
Yeah, and whatever the design was, it does work almost entirely.
Yeah.
This is another one we've done two in a row between this and Death Game. Like we've been hitting some, at least for me, like lesser seen kind of '70s things, and I've been really enjoying this journey.
It's almost like 70s is a good time for genre films.
Yeah, you'd think it's so
It's
strange.
like, no one ever says this about the 70s, but Grindhouse Pictures, good time.
We could, yeah.
What if we just rebrand to being like a kung fu podcast? Would that be a weird
Hmm.
switch?
I don't know. I'm under seen on kung
Well,
fu, so
this is what
I'd
would make
have
it an
to.
exciting podcast journey.
Yeah, maybe so.
It could be the Bride
Um.
with White Hair of alternate ending.
Oh.
That's a reference
Okay.
to a movie that you probably have never heard of.
I've heard of a lot of the kung fu movies. I just haven't sat down with a lot
Okay.
of them. But anyway, while we're still talking about this movie, and do you have anything else that you feel like we haven't covered?
I mean, no, there's just a lot of things I could say that are good. Actually, I did come up with one other thing that I don't love about it. If we want
Okay.
to kind of return to that thing, there is a scene where to get the cop at least briefly off her back, basically Jodie Foster has the magician pretend to be her dad,
Mm.
and it's a little too cheesy for the generally naturalistic sense of this movie, I think.
Yeah, I do think
Especially
it's a little.
because he's the cop's. I don't think we said this. The cop is the magician's uncle.
Yeah, so it should be obvious. It is a little cheesy. I think the moment of because you don't know that they are planning this or that they have the materials to pull this off. So the moment when like what seems to be an older gentleman comes shuffling out of the upper floor, you're like, wait, what's going on? And so that's kind of a cool rug pull for half a second. But you're right, that is the most like teeny bopper
The
scene of them.
the rug pull lasts precisely up until he opens his mouth, and I feel like if you asked a an eager theater kid in high school, okay, could you play a cranky old Jewish man? That's the performance they would give you.
Yeah.
And it does not, to me, it breaks the immersion that the cop buys this to me.
Yeah, I do think so too. Um,
It's a
yeah,
little
what are you gonna
thing.
do?
It's something the movie just needs to sort of get through. I can accept it as a we needed to get the again, we need to get the characters who aren't Martin Sheen off the table for the last scene, and this is a way to get the cop off
Hmm.
the table.
Yeah, and you got it. I think I think that plus the pneumonia storyline, where it's a little bit of like we are kind of forcing the hand of the plot a little bit
A little
to
bit.
clear the
A
table.
little bit.
But for the most part, it's still very satisfying.
Because it gets us to the
Um,
last scene, and the last scene is a fucking
yeah,
knockout.
for sure. And I will say before we leave that cop, Ron, he is played by Mort Schumann, who is part of a songwriting duo who wrote Save the Last Dance for Me, This Magic Moment, and Viva Las Vegas.
And he was actually hired in part because they were hoping he would do the soundtrack for this film. But
Oh.
he ended up having like his longtime arranger, Christian Gobert, do the soundtrack, which went from, oh God, this is awful to how endearingly 70s for me over the course of the running time. But I will acknowledge it started at, oh God, this is awful.
It does have it is a less shrill and grating sensibility than the good old dad song from Death Game, but
Oh,
it
the
does
the good
have
old dad song ruined cinema for me as a medium.
uh-huh. But it does have a similar kind of like we're gonna lean on the harpsichord a little bit and
And you know, it's a 70s movie. They have synths. They just do. So you live with it.
yeah. Yeah.
Whereas
Especially
my
for
good old dad felt like, even by the standards of 70s music movies have cheesy music, felt like an imposition. This just felt like a 70s score.
yeah. And sometimes you just gotta listen to it.
Yep.
Anyway, I'm tapped out on this movie, which I did enjoy very
Yeah,
much.
I think I've enjoyed this one as much as we've done any Bride of alternate ending episode in a bit now, frankly. I'm trying to think
Well,
of the
that's
last time I
good.
liked this much. It's probably been more recent than I can remember.
Zombies 3?
I regret to say that I like this better than Zombies 3.
Oh no. Oh, and I did text you this information, but I do feel like I need to share with the world that I learned that Milo Manheim, the lead of the Zombies trilogy, is the son of Cameron Manheim, which doesn't not make sense, but was both delightful and shocking to learn.
It
And I
is
wanted to share this.
it makes sense because he has Nepo baby energy, but also it makes sense that if your Nepo baby energy comes from Cameron Manheim, you're like the heights you're gonna hit are a trilogy of Disney Channel original musicals.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Uh, but also, okay, I also learned that he got second place on a season of Dancing with the Stars, like the year that Zombies came out. So that,
Hmm.
that's the level of stars they always pull. But that does mean that my grandparents learned who Milo Manheim was before I
It means
did.
that my mother learned who Milo Manheim was before I did.
Yeah, so that's always an interesting kind of swerve the world can pull on you. But anyway, thank you so much for listening, everybody. We're gonna be closing out this month in 2 weeks. We're gonna take a ride on the Midnight Meat Train with good old Bradley Cooper, who desperately wants to win an Oscar for directing, and they do not want him to do that.
I do not want them to do that either.
Yeah, no, yeah, I am in agreement with this, but
Maestro, more like maestro.
ooh, very good.
Burn,
But yeah.
zing.
Uh, But yes, that's what we're going to be catching up with. And see you next time, everybody. Bye bye.